Welcome back to Bonded Voices. The topic today is work, and do you have unreasonable expectations? So this topic is near and dear to all of us because the vast majority of the population does need to work. And I think this is an opportunity for us to dig a little bit deeper on, do we find joy in work, or do we have unreasonable expectations that might keep us from finding that joy? I'm Greg.
I'm Ian.
This is Lauren.
Greg, so, I like the fact that you said unreasonable rather than realistic. It's actually a much more apropos word for this.
I'm thinking through the nuance between unreasonable and unrealistic.
Reasonable being, I think, more within a spectrum of sensible, where unrealistic being, I want to be an astronaut.
Sure. Yeah, I just graduated from high school and I want to be the CEO.
Yes,
yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So maybe we should go around the horn and talk about our experiences when we first entered the workforce, and perhaps some lessons that we have learned in the effort to find enjoyment, but also setting the next generation up for success.
I think you'll also find that the stories we have from England will be a lot different than the American tale of heading into the workforce as well.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it may be just a case of when we, back in the day, back in the 80s, no one really expected you to always go to college. So the idea was, are you just going to go into the workforce? So the question was always asked at a very young age, what are you going to do when you leave school?
Well, so do you consider your first job the first job out of high school, or your first job? Because a lot of places, I know when I was in high school, everyone had jobs. Parents didn't pay for what they pay for now.
No, not at all. And that could be a whole show unto itself about that. Oh my goodness, don't get me started.
I know when we started talking about this conversation, it reminded me of some stories my dad and I would talk about this. And one of his first things he would start talking to me about the work is, one of the worst things you can do to a kid is not teaching them how to work, because in your whole life you're struggling. You never get to do the things you want to do because you don't know how to work. And then, nowadays everyone hears you find something you love and you'll never work a day of your life, right? But is that really what we should be telling kids? That's not teaching them to work. Definitely look for something you want to do, but
that's
broke.
That's an interesting. Well, there's the pain of learning through being broke on how to stretch yourself and how to perhaps make some improvements. But I think this goes back to the title of, are we hurting the kids by saying, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life? Perhaps we have, if we didn't set the stage appropriately, of the first job that you have, you will not find a whole lot of fulfillment.
Right.
Maybe. You might really struggle. And I think back of the difference between my first jobs and my first jobs in a professional role. Very different expectations. But I don't remember learning or having someone preach to me, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I don't remember hearing that until I was probably in my 30s.
Yeah, I think it's a relatively new phenomenon. When I was a kid, that was never taught. I mean, the construction, I don't think kids go, oh yeah, I really want to wake up at 3:30 in the morning and go to a construction job in the summer in Phoenix. That's not one of those things you're like...
It's not the dream job.
That's not a dream job. It's fulfilling and it teaches you a lot, but it's not something that you're like, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life.
So if I look back on my youth, the first job I had, and I use it in air quotes because I don't think I now, looking back, consider it a job until you need the money.
Okay.
Right? So my first job, one was collecting glasses in a workman's club. Smoke down to here, all these old folks sitting around smoking and drinking. Indoors, summer or winter, doors closed. Collecting glasses, getting cut, washing glasses, walking from 6 till midnight, walking around the club, picking stuff up. And then the next one was cleaning up glass at a glass factory from 7 in the morning till midday on a Saturday. But I didn't need either of those jobs.
How old were you when you started those?
15.
Okay.
So I'd ride my bike to one of them and walk to the other. And so they were just extra money.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived at home. So I didn't see them as jobs. And I think it's interesting with England, where you were out of the house at an earlier age. And I wonder now, with kids being at home longer, whether they feel the same about full-time jobs they have, but they don't really feel they need the money because mum's still providing, mum and dad are still providing.
It is a topic that I've been involved in conversations of, well, I wasn't raised this way, so my spouse and I are trying to raise our children differently than we were raised. That's not how I feel, but that's how people that I talk with on a regular basis are saying things like that. And so it's interesting, you go back to what your father said of the worst thing that you can do is not let a child learn the value of going to work and carrying their own water.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have a situation where there are a lot of kids that are staying at home and don't have the ability to, I have to make ends meet. I have to work 2 part-time jobs and a full-time job in order to pay rent and put food on the table and whatever it might be. And so, I think back to some of my jobs. I think that's an interesting delineation of when you actually needed the money. Very different. For me, it was probably, I would guess, when I was working for one of the airlines.
So what was your first job, though?
I was a paper boy, first job. And then from that, a busser at a fast food restaurant.
And when did you start working?
Well, paper route was 5th grade.
Okay.
And then as a busser, I was 15. I was in high school, but I didn't have my driver's license yet. So 15. And then I remember I worked a landscape company, worked all summer long and was able to purchase a car at the end of the summer. That was my high school car. Tremendous amount of pride in that vehicle. I ran that vehicle through the ringer. But I owned it. And so...
And you earned it.
And I earned it.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to buy our kids vehicles. They don't have a job.
Well, in defense of my parents, they did help out with some of it. I don't remember what the ratio was. I think I don't know. Maybe I put in 50% or I put in 80% or they participated to some extent on the initial purchase. Mm-hmm. We're talking about an $800 car back in 1987. So it's a beautiful Volkswagen Beetle. No power steering, no power brakes, no air conditioning. Plain and simple. Great vehicle. But you're right. You drive the high school parking lots of today, which I will argue I can remember in our high school parking lot that there were the full range of really nice cars and then kids that you could tell they worked on their car to get it to the school that day.
Yes. So I went at Shadow. That was the same way. You see kids driving a Mercedes and you roll in with a big old work truck and,
Right.
So my first job was construction. I was 15 doing masonry construction where I was lucky enough to have a family friend that gave me a job and I'd work weekends. And then during the summers, I'd be a hottie during the summers. And
you are listening to Bonded Voices. Subscribe to us on your favorite podcast service or on the web at www.bondedvoices.com. Thank you to all our sponsors, and now back to the show.
Be a hottie?
Yeah, I was just about to ask that.
Hod carrier.
Is that a way to self-describe?
All right. Yeah.
HOD.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
Hod carrier.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
Well, I think that what's interesting is that all three of our beginnings, and whatever terminology you want to use, obviously, you didn't go from working at the glass factory to your next role was boom, off and running in the music industry.
Well, there's one in between that.
Okay. So at least one. So, but I also think there were a number of different jobs that I had as I progressed through high school, through college, and then after college. There's just this general progression and direction that I would go, and obviously some course correction and adjustments, what have you. But I don't think I ever had unreasonable expectations of the work. I did the work. I appreciated the paycheck. I gave it my all, and I moved on. And yep. I can remember one of the companies that I worked for in the construction world having some good conversations with one of the owners, and he said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "Oh, geez, I don't know. I'm 16 or 17 years old at this point, maybe 18 at that point." And then he said, "Are you going to ask me the same question?" I said, "Why would I ask you the same question? You own the company." He's like, "Doesn't mean that this is it. I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up."
But back then, it seemed like it was it for him.
Well, it seemed like it was it for him.
He was at the top of the mountain. He owned a company.
Right. And for me, he owns the company.
Yeah.
I'm driving around in the owner's truck, getting him to and from different spots. And so I'm concerned, not necessarily for my own children because they've all found their first jobs, not necessarily the post-schooling, whatever that looks like, but they've all gravitated towards customer service-based jobs, retail-facing, customer-facing jobs, which is what I was hoping for them to help build more interpersonal skills. And so I'm fearful, though, that there is a massive disconnect of what people are willing to do professionally and not having interest in, you know what, I'm going to pay my dues. I'm going to do this job for a little while. Some doors are going to open. And if the door closes, then a window's going to open.
Well, so like when we were kids, and I'm sure it was the same way in England as it was here, but we were always told, you know, find the blue chip companies, work for corporate, and climb the ladder, and someday you're going to be, you know, middle management or upper management, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. But I think somewhere along the lines, it's changed. Like the workforce has changed where working for the, you know, blue chip companies are not what it used to be. And so people are switching the way they want to work.
So you talk about unrealistic expectations. This is going to make me sound really old. I remember in school when I was 14, the kid sitting next to me said that he wanted to work in the pop factory, screwing bottle tops on. So these were the days when
Big Laverne and Shirley.
Before automation, he would screw the bottle top on, it would click, and then to get it off, it would break the seal. But he wanted to do that for his job out of school. It's kind of fascinating. And then we talk about unrealistic expectations. The job I had in between the glass factory and the club was at FedEx. And I used to ride 10 miles on my push bike in the dark to start at 9 o'clock at night. And it was unloading wagons, the 18-wheeler trailers. Some days the door would open, it'd be full of onions. Other days it'd open, it was full of raw plugs, big heavy bolts. And you have to put them on a conveyor belt, push them up. But I mean, they paid a lot of money. And the overtime, at Christmas we would work 17-hour days. And the double time after your normal shift. Yep. So we earned a ton of money. I bought my first house at 18. And again, it was that situation where I think if I describe to my kids, would you do this for a living? They'd be like, hell no. Ride 10 miles to work, winter. Well, it's mainly winter in England most of the time, so it's raining, so you're in your rain gear on a push bike until I could afford a car. Mm-hmm. And then I eventually, about 6 months in, bought a VW Golf.
So did you buy your first house before you bought your first car?
No, car first. Yeah.
How far was that time split?
Oh, about another year later.
Okay.
So I worked for FedEx for 2 years.
Okay. Well, and did you think at that point in time, this is it, I've reached my pinnacle?
No, everyone kept telling me if I stay with the company, you'll go a long way here. And they thought I was crazy when I left. And actually, most people, when I told them I was leaving, I put my 2 weeks notice in, thought I was just full of it. They're like, you're not leaving. There's no way you're leaving this job.
And that's based on their belief was that's the pinnacle.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't even think it was that. I think it was more of a case of that it was just a good, high-paying job with a very stable company that had a lot of futures. It was supply chain, right?
Blue chip company. You get a start and you just work your way up the ladder. That's the way we've always been taught.
Yeah.
My father, I think, has asked me maybe 5 or 10 times, over the last 35 years, why didn't you stay at that company? You would have been doing so well if you would have done that. I'm like, Dad, I'm doing pretty good. I'd still be living there. So
in winter, 9 months out of the year,
all day long. Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, the unrealistic expectations is a big one. Because, there's that old joke about, I used to walk, 10 miles uphill to work and 10 miles uphill back home.
Right.
In the cold.
And we loved it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Without shoes.
But it definitely wasn't as cushy as the kids have got it today.
Would you let your kids do the same jobs that you did?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Would you think they would do it?
No.
Yeah, I don't think the kids would do it. I mean, I went from construction, which is sweaty work during the summer, and then I worked drilling rigs as a roughneck on drilling rigs, which is super dangerous. I've taken them on drilling rigs before to show them this is what, I did and what Grandpa used to do, and they're like, this looks boring. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I can recall the year. I remember the day that it turned 122 degrees here in Phoenix. I was working for that same construction company that I really enjoyed the camaraderie, the sense of at the end of the day there was something there. But we were doing an install of cabinetry in a church in the East Valley, and the parking lot was all asphalt, no trees. And we had these huge pallets that we would set on the trailer. And I remember laying underneath the pallets on the bed of the trailer, so I wasn't on the asphalt, but that was the only place that I could find to cool off. No air conditioning, just out of the sun. And that was part of my motivation of, okay, what am I going to do next? But I didn't ever take the job as.
But see that knowing how difficult it could be at a job where it's 122 and you're outside working construction, you're like, I know I can do better in this, and it's a motivator to make you do better. And I'm sure, so are we shortchanging our kids by not letting them get that motivator?
So I think you also hit on something else of we know we can do it.
Yeah.
So have we also potentially not let a generation realize what they can accomplish?
Oh, that's a good point.
That, yeah, you know what? There's plenty of people that go out to work when it's 122 degrees. They make certain accommodations. They maybe adjust their diet, fluid intake, whatever it is. But they survive and they can do it. And there's a sense of accomplishment there. So if they were to grow up with someone saying, well, you never want to do that. You can't do that. Humans can't live through that. Are we helping or hurting?
And have the expectations of become unrealistic, as in,
I don't have to do that type of job.
Yeah, and I'm going to be here. I'm going to be a CEO because I'm going to get a degree.
Right.
But
I'm going to be the one telling everybody else what to do.
right, because I have a degree, or that I'm going to be a superstar basketball player, or I'm going to make my money as a model, or whatever that is. Is that become unrealistic rather than just to our topic unreasonable? That's the question I'm asking, because I wonder with my kids, what do they want to do? And I think I know what both of them want to do, and it's I don't know how much I should have input on it, because it's their story, it's their life. Like we said, we knew we could do it, and I never want to tell them, no, you can't do that.
But will they push themselves to go beyond if they've never hit a challenge?
But does it matter?
Because we didn't have it.
So,
we did. We self-motivated because no one else would motivate us. We talk our kids up all the time. At least I do. Like, oh, you're going to do great,
I heard someone recently, they said something to the effect of, I tell my kids how proud I am of them. And the person that I was having the conversation with said, my parents never told me that. Am I making my kids soft by telling them how proud I am of them? And I don't know the answer to that.
I think it depends what you're telling you're proud of, what they've done. So I don't think any of our kids are stupid to where if they dove in the swimming pool and you're like, I'm so proud of you for that, and you're like, it's a dive in the swimming pool. It's not exactly like,
Well, for in the baseball world, it's where we live, the kids don't compete as well as kids in other areas, and it's because they're Scottsdale soft, right? Everything's handed to them. They're not challenged as much as, say, a kid from South Phoenix.
Well, so it's interesting you say that. We've had that conversation before. I can remember when all of our kids were Little League, there was one of the families that lived not too far from us. I can remember watching that kid riding his bike to and from practice every time there was practice. And our practice times weren't exactly the same, but I can remember passing him on the roadway and thinking, that reminds me of when I was growing up. Because I rode my bike to get to baseball practice. My parents didn't drop me off or pick me up. No, that's how you figure it out. You put your glove on the small end of the bat, you slide it as far as you can, over the shoulder you go, you got your gear. The coach always had a big bag of batting helmets. Yeah. Don't know what happened if lice went through that team, but that wasn't a concern back then. Exactly. So the coach would show up with a bucket of balls and the helmets, and you showed up with your glove and your bat, you're good to go. Rather than, all right, here's the row of 15 cars dropping off 15 kids. And, it was a different time. I'm guilty of that as well. We've driven our kids to and from practices. I'm guilty of that.
Oh, and I'll stay at practice and watch. And
sure.
I'm guilty as well.
Right.
So what do we say to parents who have got kids in the same space as us that are looking for, one, you want to fledge them, you want to get them out of the house. You want to be able to tell them you love them and you're proud of them for doing what they're doing. But what advice could we pass on that's going to help them get their kids to launch?
So I think I've mentioned this before, but one of the first people that I worked with in my professional life talked about you can take it could take you a year to make the perfect piece of pottery, or you could make 365 pieces of pottery between now and the end of the year. And by the time you reach the end of that year, you will have created a perfect piece of pottery. But will you have created 364 others or one? And so the way I interpret that is just get in the game.
Yeah.
Just get the kids to, hey, you know what? You need to get a job because you want new earbuds? Great, you're buying them. Hey, you need to pay for whatever it might be to get them that satisfaction of them earning the money. And that I've seen that in our kids' faces.
So I think that's the big hurdle, is them paying for their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a sense of pride when you buy it yourself. When you buy your first house, you're like, I was 18
Yeah.
and bought my first house.
It matures you quick. Responsibility.
So
That's amazing at 18.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. I actually made like £12,000 on it when I sold it as well. And back then it was another crazy real estate market, so it got
Sure.
timing good on there.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I that's my viewpoint is motivate the kids to be responsible for. They'll also tend to take better care of stuff
Yep.
Yeah.
when they've invested in it.
yeah, definitely. If they're the ones buying it, they're gonna be careful. That's mine.
Yeah. And yeah, but kids have to launch. Kids have to go into the workforce. We need a whole new lineage of workers and ideas and businesses. So yeah, just try and get your kids to launch. So for this edition of Bonded Voices, get us on the web, come join, register, and we'd love to hear from you about your kids and any advice that you have that we can incorporate in another episode, or if you want advice for us on an issue you got with your kids, we're all open to have a conversation as well. So till next time, I'm Ian,
I'm Greg.
I'm Warren.
and we'll see you next time on Bonded Voices.